Okay, I'm going to talk about diversity, specifically diversity of culture. So, this kind of relates to the immigration issue we have in the United States right now. And a lot of people are arguing that, the Biden administration is only allowing these immigrants in because they are going to vote for Biden, and then by extension, they're going to usher in a democratic hellscape that completely pushes the Republican Party into obsolescence, right? But regardless of the Democrat Republican stuff, I just want to speak about culture and diversity of culture. So, what is a lack of diversity of culture? What would be an example of that? Well, an example would be North Korea, right? They're basically a fascist dictatorship, and they have a monoculture. And anyone who tries to kind of stretch outside of that monoculture, yeah, they're going to get in trouble, right? They can't challenge the dictator. They can't challenge the culture that the dictator puts forward. So the opposite of a monoculture is it's like a multicultural nation, right? And the United States could be defined as a multicultural nation. We have people from all over the planet that live here, and I'm going to compare the, I'm going to compare kind of the implications of a monocultural nation and a multicultural nation. Okay, so if you have a monocultural nation, what is that going to lead to? Well, it's going to lead to perhaps a fascist dictatorship like North Korea, or perhaps the fascist dictatorship is what leads to the monoculture. But beyond that, it's going to lead to a again a lack of diversity of not just culture, but a lack of diversity of ideas and of thoughts in general, because everyone is kind of living their life in the same way. They don't have they're not looking at the world, they're not looking at reality from different angles. Okay, so when you have a multicultural nation, when you have a multicultural populace, what happens is you get a greater diversity of thoughts and ideas. And in particular, if we look at the United States, who is a pretty multicultural nation. Again, there's people from all over the world that live in this country, of all religions, and pretty much people from all over the planet. What does this? What implications can be assumed from a multicultural nation? Well, if we were to look at the behavior of the United States government right now, we're kind of a little bit imperialistic, right? We have military bases around the world, and we're also kind of involved in a lot of these wars. We can call them proxy wars, and we're some nations, some cultures around the world would consider us terrorists. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So, despite the fact that we may have considered ISIS terrorists, those if we bombed the parents of the ISIS members, then what's going to happen? Those ISIS members are going to become terrorists, right? They're going to seek revenge for the rest of their life. So, if we were to be a monoculture as this powerful imperialistic nation, what would happen? Well, we would perhaps look a little bit like Nazi Germany. If we were to be a monocultural nation that was all, without a diversity of culture, without a diversity of thoughts and ideas, then perhaps we would turn into a Nazi Germany type of empire. And the reason I say that is because we're all have the same beliefs, and those same beliefs leave us kind of vulnerable to a dictator like Hitler, right? But the fact that we are not, we don't have a monoculture, the fact that we have this diverse culture in the United States, what are the effects of that? Well, it kind of saves us from that fascist dictatorship, right? Because no single dictator is going to be able to gain control over the whole population. There'll be a civil war before that happens, right? If Trump becomes president and tries to take over the country, the Democrats aren't going to put up with it. There'll be a civil war before we become an imperialistic nation like Germany, right? Like Nazi Germany. So what this diversity of culture has done in the United States is it has kind of given us the ability to, not the ability, but it's given us it's implied that we have diverse interests, right? So when we have people from the Middle East that live in the United States, when we have people from China that live in the United States, when we have people from all over Asia, Russia, Middle East, Europe, South America, Africa, when all those people live in one place and that nation is powerful, like the United States, what happens is the voters who are diverse naturally, right? There are United States voters who are from all over the world. They are going to prioritize the interests of those voters are going to be diversified. So you're going to have a group of Middle Eastern voters who don't like it when Israel is funded by the US government and they attack Hamas, right? You're going to have a group of perhaps Russian Americans who don't like it when America threatens a war with Russia. You're going to have a group of Chinese Americans who don't like it when the United States threatens a war with China. What this diversity does, this diversity of culture within the voting population, is it ensures, at least in the long term, that the United States isn't going to become some imperialistic machine that destroys everything and rules under one monoculture. In the long term, in other words, the immigration that we are allowing right now is kind of a way to keep the United States under control. It's a way to keep the United States from becoming an imperialistic Roman Empire, right? And you could argue that we are kind of pushing the boundaries of that, right? You could argue that we are exhibiting some characteristics of the Roman Empire. But the thing is as we expand and as we allow these other cultures into the nation, these illegal immigrants, right? As we allow them into our nation, they become part of the voting bloc. And if Republicans are going to argue that's a bad thing, I would differ from that statement. I would differ from that ideology. I would say that it's a good thing. And it's a good thing, again, because it's going to ultimately globalize the world. It's going to ultimately require that the United States becomes peaceful with the rest of the nations across the planet. And in that process, these other nations the other superpowers in the world, will hopefully also become diverse from a cultural standpoint. Hopefully, Americans will emigrate to China and Russia. That way, if those populations do vote for do elect their officials, and Russia they don't so much, right? But if the populations do elect their officials, then they will see the interests of Americans and vote accordingly. And that's kind of, it's like we have diverse interests if we have a diverse population. So this kind of contradicts the nationalistic way of looking at the world. Up until the 21st century, the world was pretty nationalistic. Nations were pretty much they're trying to improve their own nations, and perhaps at the expense of everybody else. But the thing is that technology has changed the formula. It's changed the game, because we are now dependent on people across the world for goods and services, for the supply chains that supply the raw materials for our production lines, right? This dependence is a good thing, okay? And a lot of people might disagree with that, but it's ultimately a good thing, because again, what it does is it forces us to get along with the rest of the world. And this level of dependence we have has never been seen before, because the technology has enabled that dependence. It's enabled the globalistic economy on a scale that we've never seen before. And because we've never seen it, we are kind of floundering, right? We're kind of still stuck in our nationalistic mindsets. We're still stuck in our, don't give Africa money. We need to fund we need to help the people in America, right? There's a difference though between giving Africa money for food and funding a war between Israel and Palestine, Israel and Gaza. The difference is that war only creates more terrorists. It only creates more enemies in the future. On the other hand, if you look at China and China's Belt and Road Initiative, what they're doing is effectively creating allies. They are creating goodwill for the future of their country. And they're basically creating allies with these Middle Eastern and African nations. And what that's going to do for China in the long term is it's going to create stability. They're going to be able to depend on those nations. And the United States' current strategy is the opposite of that. Again, the current United States strategy is to fund wars. And you could blame the military-industrial complex for that, or perhaps you could just blame that nationalistic mindset that we may still be stuck in, or a combination of the two. I think it's a combination. I think there are sinister people who truly believe, or rather sinister people who just want to make money off of the wars, right? Those people definitely exist out there. And they will damn the whole world to hell in the process. But there are also people who are still stuck in that nationalistic mindset. And these are the people who we need to reach out to. These are the people who we need to encourage an understanding of empathy. We need to get them to empathize with these other nations that we are becoming dependent on. Again, if we keep fostering a mindset of division between China and the United States over the microchips in Taiwan, what's going to happen? Well, we're just going to get closer and closer to a world war between two superpowers. And that world war benefits nobody. It doesn't benefit the United States or China or anyone else for that matter, right? We have to get out of this mindset, this nationalistic mindset. For the first time, again, we have the technology to globalize the world's economy in a way we have never seen before. Not in all of recorded history have we seen this level of dependence on other nations for goods and services, for raw materials, etc. This technology demands that we get along with each other. And alongside that, the internet is a great tool to help us do that. It's a great tool to help us see the similarities with these other nations rather than focusing on this nationalistic mindset that focuses on the differences between us and the people of China, right? We don't want... Nationalism is not going to save us anymore, especially economic nationalism, because it's just going to further isolate the United States. And in addition to that, stopping immigration is not going to help us either. What it's going to do is it's going to create a monoculture in the United States, and we wouldn't be exactly like North Korea, but we would inch towards that. We would move in that direction if we stopped allowing the culture in the United States to diversify. You can be scared that perhaps members of ISIS or Hamas are going to make it into the United States and harm the native population, but we already know, there are statistics on this, the native population commits more crimes than the immigrants in the United States. These are known statistics. So what happens again when we let these other cultures, the people from throughout the rest of the world, what happens when we let them into our borders and we allow them to vote in our elections is it's a melting pot, right? That's what it is. We become a melting pot. And maybe there's pockets that are of culture that are more dominant, but eventually you might reach some kind of equilibrium. And hopefully that equilibrium is reached worldwide. Hopefully we reach we all get on the same currency, and we all actually unite as the various nations in the world. Hopefully the United Nations actually has some power one day, right? And that's where we want to get to. We don't want to keep fostering this nationalistic mindset and this monocultural mindset. We want other cultures in our borders. And if you are afraid that those cultures are going to threaten your tradition, well, I hate to break it to you, but the nature of reality has changed. Everything changes. Nothing is going to stay the same forever. Nothing under the sun is going to stay the same forever. And you have to be willing to accept the change. You have to be willing to accept the cultures. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you have to change your own culture. These changes happen over long periods of time. They happen over several lifespans, several generations. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like one day a bunch of Mexicans are going to come over the border and you're not going to be able to buy an American hamburger. It's just not going to happen. The culture is diversifying because it is beneficial for the survival of the species as a collective world. And that's the pattern that you have to recognize here. Again, it's beneficial to the entire species for the most powerful militant nation, which is the United States currently, to have a diversity of cultures. And the reason it's beneficial, again, is because the voters will have diversified interests. You'll have Muslims who want to see the Middle East do well. And those Muslims will vote in such a way that keeps wars out of the Middle East funded by the United States. You'll have Chinese Americans who vote in such a way that keeps the United States from funding a war in Taiwan, etc., right? You'll have Africans who vote in such a way that encourages the United States to fund the poor countries in Africa, right? And you'll have plenty of Americans as well American voters who encourage the government to fund the poor communities here in the United States. The bottom line here is that diversity is it's nature's intelligence. Nature's intelligence lies in diversity. Diversity it's kind of like a trial and error. It's a big game of trial and error, right? Evolution, it comes up with tons of trials, it makes plenty of errors, but the diversification is effectively more trials, and the trials that work, evolution picks up on. And what we're seeing right now is a very large scale diversification of culture, and it's basically a large trial and error game. And the diverse culture is what's going to bring humanity to the next stage of civilization. It's gonna bring us to the next level in this reality. Maybe we become a multi-planetary species, but even before that, let's just get the world in order. And I think we can do that. We just have to understand what diversity does. We have to understand the nature of diversity. And if we do, then we can encourage diversity. If we do, we can accept diversity rather than, you can debate against a different culture if you want, but and ultimately we will, right? There's not a lot of women don't have a lot of rights in some Middle Eastern countries, right? Those women move from the Middle East to the United States, and they see the rights that women have here, and over time, over the generations, those rights are going to kind of migrate back to the Middle East. See, this is how we evolve as a species. We diversify and we embrace that diversity. If we learn to embrace the diversity, we can do anything, okay, as a species. We just have to think a little critically about the nature of diversity. We can't be so scared about the people that are different than us. We have to embrace those differences, and if they get scary, then stop focusing on the differences. Focus on the similarities instead. Because the truth is humans, we have 99.9% the same DNA as every other human on this planet. There's a 0.1% difference. Why are we going to focus on that when we could focus on the similarities? Why are we competing with our own species when we could compete with the environment, when we could compete to make this world a better place for everybody? So just give that a little thought. Thanks for watching.